Professor Howard Williams brings you death and memory from the past and the present. It's Archaeodeath.
So, the Archaeology of Skeleton Crew Part 2. And in Part 1 we looked at the dystopias that are juxtaposed of At-Atin and At-Akrin, planets in this fictional galaxy far, far away a long time ago, where they were protected by shields put around the planets to control particular resources and valued dimensions of the old Republic's workings. For At-Atin we know it was a mint. For At-Akrin it's unclear, but all of these 9 planets fell apart through catastrophe at one point or another, apart from At-Atin, that seems to be the lone survivor and is remembered in the rest of the galaxy as a hidden legendary treasure planet. And this adventure for kids in the Star Wars universe has 4 At-Atin teenagers who accidentally find an old spacecraft, get zoomed into beyond the barrier that protects their world into the galaxy, and have to find their way home, and pirates are hot on their heels who try to take over the planet. So my first video was about the oppositional representation of a seemingly idyllic civilization but carefully controlled, namely At-Atin, and isolated from the galaxy and therefore doomed to never progress, never develop, versus At-Akrin, which has fallen. It's in chaos, it's a ruin, and we explored both of those. And of course the kids with Jod, who is a former pirate captain and a sort of renegade character, when they go back to At-Akrin, we realise that the droid SM-33 that is on the ship there flying was the droid of a former pirate a long lost pirate captain, Captain Tad Renaud, and we learn that they had been here before, and that in the supervisor's tower there are the names and coordinates etched into the pillars of each of the planets. So despite these being secret planets, the supervisory control rooms have the sort of inscribed in monumental form the secrets of all the other planets' locations, so they are sort of connected to each other. And they find that the At-Atin coordinates have been destroyed by SM-33, whose memory has been controlled, and but he remembers he did. And so Captain Fern, as one of the 4 kids, is able to tell SM-33 to remember what he's forgotten, and in doing so, JB then is able to, one of the other kids is able to remember what he has forgotten, and they're able to find their coordinates back to At-Atin. But anyway, the point is, the At-Akrin is a society in chaos, but it provides a clue for their return home. And so this leads us to think about the piratical material culture. So I've dealt with the dystopian, let's look at the piratical. Now the first of these is the Onyx Cinder itself, a ship that's heavily armoured, old-fashioned, and is uncovered in a makeshift archaeological excavation. It's found by accident in a canyon or crevasse on the planet by Wim, who returns with Neil and JB and Fern, and they then do a minor form of KD, sorry, not JB, KD. They do a sort of minor excavation of the site and reveal what Wim is hopeful, because he's obsessed with the Jedi. He hopes it's going to be a Jedi temple hidden, but it's actually we've learned it's part of a ship. So, and on the ship they encounter SM-33, who is a really evocative, stylized droid, because at one level he's has a antiquated look, he's rusty, he's old, he's frozen mid-action, and he is also skeletal. Wim thinks he's a skeleton when first encountered, so he has that sort of spooky space pirate aesthetic sort of in his very design. And they take off and they realise that the ship is full of a skeleton crew. It has skeletons. It has that sort of spooky abandoned space pirate vessel vibe to it, and you encounter evidence they died in a duel, impaling each other with blades. And so the Onyx Cinder itself, as we learn it's called, is a piece of a wreck of it's a piece of archaeology that's uncovered and has clues of skeletons to its story. And the second point is Port Borgo, which is a sort of Tortuga of space. It's a sort of Pirates of the Caribbean, sort of rough and ready renegade space in an asteroid belt, hidden, where pirates in different sized ships are at port. It's defended by cannons, so it's very much just like a space equivalent of a rogue pirate base. And the aesthetic here is it's foreshielded, and it has subterranean caverns, dungeons where miscreants are kept before trial and execution. It also has a whole series of other elements to it, as well as a ferry service that serves the ships. You get this sense of organisation and chaos, this anarchy of space pirates, where everything is for money, violence is just around the corner, and there's no real law and order. There are jetties with cargoes waiting to be unloaded, offloaded of the loot that's been acquired. There's all manner of services and stalls for selling food and other kinds of entertainments. You get a sense of a regulated, structured space, but very much a ramshackle and without a centralised authority. And I think that's the netting here gives that further aesthetic of a sort of a space version of a 18th or late 17th century port in the Caribbean or somewhere like that. It's very much giving that pirate aesthetic. And we explore the various material cultures of the Port Borgo, and the most interesting bit of which is when Jod is looking for SM-33, who's been captured, is actually found hung up in chains like a chained prisoner. It's very piratical punishment. They're actually torturing the droids, and he encounters other droids that talk back to him, and so you get different protocol droids, one that rushes off thinking it's got to save its master, an aristocrat, clearly remembering the last time it was switched on when it was attacked by pirates, and even sort of you get sort of in story allusions to the droid armies of the Clone Wars, so you get that sense of the galaxy from decades before. And so I think the Onyx Cinder and Port Borgo themselves sort of set up this aesthetic, as well as the pirate ship, this dark, dangerous, violent, anarchical world of pirates, which very much fits the stereotype of how historic pirates are shown, particularly in the most recent rendition in the 4 series, Black Sails. It's very much a space version of that. The humour comes when they go to Lanupa. And Lanupa is the destination that SM-33 tells them that's where Tad Renard had his lair. So this is where they anticipate getting clues to the location of At-Atin. And this is a bit of humour here, because they escape. They're going there to somewhere that they're supposed to be dark and dangerous, where there are bubbling pits of mud and the bones of the captain's enemy in his underground lair under Skull Ridge Mountain. And it sounds like classic sort of piratical, sort of scary space. And then they realise that Demon's Rest, or Battle World as it was previously called, is now called Lanupa, and is a spa with hot mud used for its curative properties, and it's for privileged entertainment. And we have the banking clan are going to be holding a meeting there. And so you have this comedy moment where the ships approaching are thought to be sort of some pirate crew still living there, but it's actually pleasure yachts and visiting this luxury spa over these mud pits. So it's utterly comedic that SM-33 comes back decades later. So we don't actually know how long since the legendary Tad Renard had tried to find At-Atin, and finds his Skull Ridge Mountain converted into a spa. And so this luxury is therefore a bit of a parody of the consumerist and pleasure-seeking nature of much of the galaxy outside of the the oppression of the empire or the control of the republic. It's an independent world, but they find clues to that pirate archaeology, if you like, of the hidden story, which is remembered as part of the sales pitch of Lenupa, that it's legendary the caves were carved by pirates. Well, these are the pirates returning, and they find clues to it in the various sort of glyphs that are left on the walls. They're looking for the sign of Tad Renard, and here's Jod looking for those clues. Here's the mud spa as it's constructed, and they get beneath into the caves and they find the bones of people who've been slaughtered in by booby traps trying to access the treasure of Tad Renard and we have skeletons impaled on spikes, and we find the captain's mark, and of course to get through the acid bath they have a clue. There's always a clue and the clue is to dedicate something that's most precious to you, and for a pirate that's not life, that's treasure. So by throwing some of the dataries into the acid bath, it floods away, and they're able to get into the subterranean lair of this famed pirate captain. And of course here's the archaeology of secret underground lairs full of treasure, with this ridiculous amounts of loot everywhere, these sigils on the wall that are never explained, the skull, you know, it all fits into that pirate aesthetic of spooky, dark, macabre, and there are traps even within this room. But they learn the location of At-Atin via accessing the computer and escape. So there's a whole series of piratical cliches of treasure chambers, subterranean lairs, and dangerously named places. Battleworld, Demon's Rest, which is a bit stolen off Doctor Who actually, and also the Skull Ridge Mountain name. So it all fits into that aesthetic, and we don't understand these glyphs on the wall. They're never mentioned, but they allude to the fact this may have been a reoccupation of a far more ancient space. So moving on from there, the other aspect of Lenupa that's worthy of our consideration is the representation of rubbish. And this is again an interesting aspect of the Star Wars universe, and Mandalorian goes here too, this critique of mass disposal of a consumerist society. So here this leisure spa has vast amounts of detritus being dumped in the wastelands surrounding it, and there's whole species of robot that are living living in mech as like hermits who are exploiting and living off this rubbish. So you get that sense of old droids, abandoned droids, with creatures living off the metal and the parts, and also this huge, great sort of destructive recycling crab that's about to gobble up the ship itself of the Onyx Cinder, and they have to escape. So you get this dark, dangerous, sort of terrifying world of recycling, which is a critique on sort of the consumerist nature of these global societies in the TV show. And then finally, that's the piratical archaeology. Finally, we move on to the Observatory Moon, where we have a character who is Kim, who we encounter as a friend of Jod, but she knows him as Crimson Jack, one of his many pseudonyms. And we learn that Kim is not only has trinkets and tokens for over 1,000 worlds, so she's a bit of an antiquarian, but so on this Observatory Moon you get the sense of a dedicated space station for observing the galaxy, with all of these objects. And she knows of the jewels of the Old Republic. She retrieves an elaborate scroll, and she's able to tell them of the destruction of all but one of these 9 jewels of the Old Republic long ago, and that At-Atin is only remembered in sea shanties. So we're shown this old scroll which has the art very similar to that scene on At-Atin. That's the clue that this is telling of a long lost place. And crucially, Keem, as an archaeologist or an antiquarian, is able to observe that the glyphs on Fern's backpack, she says, I've never seen Palmarish numerals used in Proto-Republic artefacts. So she's looking back into the past. She's aware that this is a development of something that she's not seen in the rest of the galaxy, an indigenous evolution on Atatin of ancient symbols. So she's able to see something ancient but in a form she hasn't seen before. And so this is again showing you the archaeology at work. So Neil's a bit of an archaeologist in observing the tree growth means that the Atacarin landscape hasn't recently been destroyed. Keem, much more advanced, is able to work out the different symbols that make up her badge that she was given to by her mother for being top of the class. Skeleton Crew creates an immersive set of counterpoints in material culture inspired by various past times, including concepts and visions of contemporary and past civilizations as dystopias of either under surveillance and droid control or ruination and constant warfare. And these pair of fates for civilizations, peace and order, but doomed by isolation and oppression versus regression, conflict and chaos, are in turn contrasted with the anarchy and barbarity of various stereotypes of pirates and piracy mediated by their own distinctive materialities. And this lust for treasure sits at the crux of these relationships. This hunger for access to cold, hard credits and control of Atatin's mint is sought by the pirates and controlled by the droids. The real heroes are the amateur archaeological adventurers, represented by Fern, KB, Neil and Wim, as well as the knowledge and support of Keem, the bird lady. And perhaps also Farah and Wendell are also heroic, even though they're reluctant to do so, because they're finally encouraged by their kids to resist both the supervisor and the pirates. And in short, Skeleton Crew uses material cultures inspired by the human past in fascinating ways in its world building and storyline, reflecting on and critiquing the different challenges faced by superficial but detrimental peace and order versus violence and chaos. So I hope this review of the dystopian, piratical and the antiquarian themes within Skeleton Crew is of interest, and you can find my blog posts on this and other Star Wars series on my Archaeotech WordPress blog. For relaxing times, make it Archaeotech time.